This is the award-winning real estate recruitment company Madison Berkeley's Empower Equity campaign reverse mentoring sessions. We are supported by the industry network organisation Ladies in Real Estate. This week, each day, we will publish a session involving a junior female in the industry, reverse mentoring a senior female in our industry. Now, the aim of the Empower Equity campaign is to address the issue of female retention within our industry. Historically, the representation of women has been very low, running at around 13% in this industry for many years. However, the good news is that figure has gone up quite dramatically, and the work being done around EDI is starting to pay off. The latest figures, though, from Real Estate Balance Industry Survey 2022, which were released in February, found that at board level within the sector, female representation is still very low in our industry. It's running at 29%. And at senior and leadership level, it's just 27%. So this backs up the problems that we are hearing about surrounding retention. Each female partnership in these Empower Equity campaign sessions will aim to start conversations surrounding the issues causing this lack of retention. And the hope is that by opening up these discussions, change may be effected and more females will remain in our industry at senior and leadership level. Now it's time to hand over to the junior female and senior female taking part in today's session. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Kate Peters. I'm a director in the Prime Residential London Valuation team at JLL.
And my name is Sophia Clarke, and I am an asset manager working at Martley Capital. Thank you very much, Kate, for speaking to me today. I think it might be best if we do a few intro questions with you. Maybe you could briefly run through your experience and your involvement in different initiatives in terms of diversity and inclusion and women in the industry.
Thanks, Sophia. I've worked at JLL for coming up for 21 years. Within my time there, on top of my day job, spent time working with our communities group. I co-chaired the Working Parents Network at JLL for a couple of years. 2 of those years being COVID years. And I also have done some work with JLL and a group called the 93% Club. I am a mental health first responder at JLL and also a maternity returners buddy.
Awesome. So you've obviously been working in real estate for over 20 years. Can you share your personal experience as a state school educated woman in an industry dominated by privately educated men and how this has changed over that time?
That's a huge first question. You could take up the whole time just trying to get onto this one. The real estate industry has changed significantly in the 20-21 years that I have worked there. I'll be honest and say that I didn't really realise when I entered the industry how male it was and how unusual it would be to be a woman. I remember when I was looking for jobs, there were a couple of firms that specifically said on their application forms, will only take students from red bricks. And I remember thinking at the time, well, you're not for me in that case. And at one of my first interviews, I was told, you're a woman, it ticks the box. Great. And at that time, I just thought, you know what, that's probably not the right thing to say, but this is my first job. I will keep quiet about it. And I was also asked at my interview, and I didn't think this really played out until later in my life, if I knew anybody in the industry. And possibly naively, I said, no, why would I? Not realizing that it's quite a traditional, has been in the past, quite a traditional family business. When I joined the team, I joined a firm called King Sturge, which JLL merged with probably about 10, 11, 12 years ago now. I joined in the Manchester office as a graduate. At the time, there was hardly any women over the age of 30 in the office. The women that were in the office were typically support staff. So the surveyors were nearly all male and support teams were female. And the women that were in the office or that were surveyors were honestly quite frosty, not desperately approachable, and certainly didn't talk about their families or their home lives at all. It had a very steely outer face. Now, in hindsight, can understand why that would be the case. Families and personal lives weren't really talked about in the office, or if they were, it was almost as a scapegoat. The phrase that was bandied around often, I'll see if I can get a pass from the wife in order to go out.
I've heard that
really,
a lot.
I can't believe it still exists, which is astonishing. And I always was so bamboozled by that. And I just thought, hold on, guys, you know what? If you don't want to come out, just say, don't use your wife and your family as a scapegoat. Maybe she doesn't want to hang out with you that much either. But, don't use them as an excuse. I would always thought I would be furious if anyone said that about me. And I moved from Manchester down to London. And I think the school thing didn't really come out to play when I was in Manchester. It was only when I moved to London and people would say, I don't think it was particularly an unpleasant thing to say, but like, oh, where did you go to school? And then after a while, I'd realised that, I'd say this is where I'd gone to school, and it was clearly nowhere that anyone had heard of or knew of. And then that's when I really realised that was something that was used as a differentiator between people. Oh, okay, you went to this school, therefore I am comfortable with you and everything that goes around you. Privilege wasn't a thing then. People didn't say that you are privileged, that you have privileged. And I always was desperate to be considered on my merit of work rather than who I knew in the industry and who my family connections were. But that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And you could still see that connections were made and deals were done on golf courses or with an old boys network. However hard you worked, you would never quite be part of that group. And again, I think that has changed quite a lot. As my time moved on, I always found it very frustrating and a little bit disappointing, to be honest, to be asked or to work with people who clearly didn't really want to be there, that were just in this industry because it was a profession. It's something that I must do because my family expect me to do it. And I always found that heartbreaking when there's people out there and who would work so hard and desperately want that seat, and they're not even given an opportunity to get to the table to do that. I always found that frustrating. But things have changed a lot. Yes, we've got a long way to come, but in the 20 years that I've been there, things have moved on. There is still a lot of work to do. As a whole, real estate is still a people business. It's still relationships. As much as we can talk about the advancement of technology, which has been wonderful in so many ways, there's still very many relationships. And I think we really have to reflect our actual society. Real estate isn't something that needs to be aloof or separate, or that needs to be held up as something different. We need to reflect the real world. And the only way we can do that is by having a fully diverse sector for employees. And I think the industry as a whole has become, in my time, a lot more open and a lot more honest. It very much depends who you work for, I think, not just in terms of firm, but also who you're reporting into and how they behave and how you see them behave. So I think it's very important that we have senior role models in industries being open and honest. There is still a lack of women at board level. Maternity and parental leave and returning to work are often still difficult areas, not necessarily just as a result of real estate, something that is well discussed and crippling many women, not just in real estate, is the cost of childcare. I think we have the second highest cost of childcare in the world. It really makes a big difference. It really makes a huge difference. And the other really big thing that, to talk about for women and retaining women in the industry is, policies that are relevant. At JLL, we actually have a specific menopause policy, which is brilliant. It's discussed by our female CEO, state-educated CEO, a lady called Stephanie Hine, who's an inspiration. Men and women are trained in respect of this policy. And I can guarantee you, nobody 20 years ago was even mentioning the word menopause. And if they were, they were sniggering and laughing. And here we are openly discussing it at our desks.
Great, yeah.
It's wonderful because it allows you to be yourself and it allows you to be authentic. And when you are happy and authentic in your place of work, the chances of you staying there are, greatly improved. Where we want to get to, going back to the state school thing, where I'd really want to get us to the point of, or not just us, but the industry as a whole, is when graduates do have those conversations around where did you go to school, that nobody from state school says, which is what I used to say, or nowhere you've ever heard of. You can say, I went to Daintree School in Daventry, rather than keeping it quiet, and be proud of the fact that that's where you went to school and that you are still on an equal playing field with your peers.
Completely. So, and in terms of wider diversity and inclusion, have you witnessed a positive shift or any key developments that you can share?
It's a great question again, Sophia. The fundamental shift has come when organisations have realised that it is them that need to change, not the people that work for them.
That's really interesting, actually. I've not heard that before, but you're right. It all stems from the organisation and what they're putting out there, isn't it?
Exactly. People are not broken. We had a very great conversation about this, particularly about working mothers. Working mothers are not broken. They just need the organisation of their culture to work for them. They're in fact some of the most efficient, hardworking people I have ever met. And we don't need to be changed to fit into our industry. Our industry needs to change to fit us into it as well. And once that culture is set, it creates a place where individuals can truly thrive.
And you mentioned earlier about how role models and good managers are so important for that culture. And I couldn't agree more, I think, especially at graduate level. So when I started on the Workman graduate scheme 4 years ago, my manager, she's one of the most inspirational women who I've ever met and worked for. And I completely agree. I wouldn't have the same outlook on my working life and my career and have felt like I can really take on anything had I not had her support and her openness about, she was a working mother as well, and her openness about how work it's very important, but it's not everything.
That works both ways. And we have, similar to you, we have graduates coming into our team. And something that struck me only last year, two young ladies working in my team, both who'd had working parents when they were younger, and the support that they could give to me was incredible, for them saying, you know what, it's going to be okay. Maybe exactly. You didn't make a cake for the school fete this weekend. Just buy one from the shop, no one cares. So that level of reverse mentoring upwards was such a comfort and very supportive. And it makes you think, actually, you know what, we are doing the right thing here.
Definitely. So are there any policies that have been implemented at JLL or any other organisations that you're familiar with that have been particularly successful in fostering an inclusive and equitable culture?
Sophia, there is so much. I won't be able to fit it all in. A fundamental one is centralisation of childcare costs, of maternity pay, of parental leave pay. The moment that a specific team are consciously or unconsciously choosing who to join that team because a woman might potentially be of childbearing age, it just can't happen. That cost has to be centralised so that those choices are not made, whether they are conscious or unconscious. And that it builds a pathway for a woman at that stage, as long as they're supported through that time where they're potentially having a family. And building on that, we have, and I know we have, one of the best parental leave policies within the industry. So our Parenting Matters policy is for all parents, and all parents are entitled to 52 weeks of leave, 6 months of full pay, and they only need to have served 6 months with the business.
Because often you see these amazing paternity and maternity policies, but then you have to have had a number of years service before you can access them. So yeah, that's really impressive.
It's fantastic. There's no clawback. And, I know that there are times when things don't go right. Outside of our organisation, there's a couple of organisations, Pregnant and Screwed, I think, are a brilliant charity.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Who will help people where people aren't supported. And JLL have supported a group called Careering into Motherhood, which is another brilliant organisation that supports working mothers, professional working mothers as well. A couple more. I'm sorry, there are a lot.
No, keep going, please.
We also have a brilliant health and wellness policy. We have mental health first responders listed in the office. There's a fantastic employee support program. So things that weren't discussed even 10 years ago at work, things that are so incredibly important to your working life. If your home life isn't great, if things are not brilliant and you need some help, it's so important that you are supported through this. So there's non-referral GPs, there's counselling available, and we have a really great programme of mid and senior managers who will talk about lived and personal experiences. And again, going back to the role model point, once you see that, it's okay to talk about these things in a safe culture and in a safe space, I can be comfortable being myself at work with everything that goes with being a human. The one great thing to come out of COVID was obviously horrific times, but we have a policy called Flex Your Day. And this principally stemmed out of the Working Parents Network, where we could say, look, you know what, parents, we know what we need to do. We can do our job. I just possibly can't do it between the hours of 8 and 5, or at a time when my children are at home from school, because I actually can't do it all at the same time.
Yeah.
So this stemmed out of that. Maybe a brilliant time for working for me might be much earlier in the morning, or maybe a little bit later at night, or just, I pop out and get my children from school every Tuesday and Friday, and just having that balance, it pays back so much. It pays back so much. Not having that expectation, you must be at your desk from 8:30 until 6 every single day. It's just not needed. And that has then gone on to create a culture of trust and respect. And it just pays forward and on and on and on and on. And then one last one is something called JLL Thrive, which is an internal policy that we have. And that is a specific career progression policy for ethnically underrepresented colleagues at JLL to ensure that there are open pathways for everybody within our business.
That's really interesting. So one of the initiatives that you mentioned there was that you are a maternity leave returners buddy. Can you explain what this role entails, and if there are any positive outcomes that you can share that's resulted from your position in this role?
I realised when you asked me this question that we really need to change the title of this, because it needs to be called a parental leave return buddy, not just a maternity leave return buddy. There's a group of us who are mat leave return buddies. It's a volunteer programme. It's there for as parents, mums and dads come back to work in the early days. It can be incredibly overwhelming to have gone from one extreme to the next extreme. It can be a great joy as well to suddenly have a hot cup of tea, a calm and some adult conversation. So it's to help people settle back into work, to help them re-navigate work. Technology can move on significantly in a year. I remember saying, Teams, what's the point of this? And now look, we use it all day, every day. And it's a place to offload any worries or concerns with somebody who sat in your seat, sat in the place that you've sat in, talk about childcare options, and to just be there with experience. People's return to work can be incredibly different. Mine was very, very positive, hence probably why I stepped up to be a buddy. But, there are cases where people's entire teams have changed and they come back to working for somebody completely different. That is not an easy place to negotiate when you are possibly, you've come off the back of a year of broken sleep every night for a very long time. It's emotionally exhausting. So we're there to just provide a lot of genuine love and support.
That's really nice. It reminds me of the buddy system we had for graduates. On your first day, you were given a graduate who had started the year before. And then when you'd been there for a year, you became a buddy to a new graduate. And it's really nice to have someone who can kind of relate to your experience and answer those questions that you think are silly, but probably aren't.
They're never a silly question.
So moving on to the 93% Club, which is a members club for state school educated university students. Please, can you tell me about your involvement with this social mobility charity?
The 93% Club I'm so pleased that I found them, because it was finally, the place you're like, what, this is what we've needed for such a long time. I wanted to do something, since I started. It's not an easy thing to do by yourself. 93% Club, the reference to 93 is that 93% of children are in state school education, obviously leaving a section of 7 that sit in private school education. It was set up by an inspirational young lady called Sophie Pender at Bristol University about 7 years ago. Sophie, as many people have done, thought, what, I've got to university, this is it, I've made it. And then arrived at university to discover that she was asked this question many, many times, where did you go to school? And then that filtered down into, oh, okay, not a lot of you, but a lot of, all of you, but a lot of you have known each other from school, or you've been in this Russell group of schools, and I played you at lacrosse, etc., etc. So she set up this wonderful university student group. They have plants in different universities as well, and they run national events and then local events. They do things like student careers fairs, introducing people to potential employers, jobs that you might not have even known that you could do. These are things that you can do. They will help students write CVs, do headshots for their CVs, they'll run mock interviews. And we were very fortunate to support one of their most recent events, their kind of flagship event, which is called the Social Mobility Factory. And this was a whole day. In this particular one was in central London, and our capital markets CEO, a guy called Steve Jack, was asked to speak at this. And he told the room about his journey from a comprehensive school in the Northeast to his current seat as capital markets CEO at JLL, with some very funny anecdotes along the way about realizing that he didn't know how to use chopsticks where the rest of his cohort did, because it was something he'd never been taught. The charity are on the edge of launching a professionals network rather than just to have students. And I think, I've signed up for this, and I'm very excited about it, because it carries on this kind of narrative. It carries on. It's very exciting, and a non-exclusive club for state school professionals to join and extend their networks.
Amazing. Have you ever encountered any specific challenges or resistance when advocating for diversity and inclusion in the industry?
Again, another great question. And I had to really rack my brains about this. And this is maybe why I've worked at King Sturgeon JLL for nearly 21 years. Apart from a few spats with colleagues about graduate recruitment and A-level results, which I think are over considered and come from a time when your life is in flux and you're tested so greatly on this tiny little segment of your life. Apart from that, I genuinely haven't really.
That's really really positive to hear.
Hence the time with the same firm.
Yeah. And I guess to wrap up, my final question was, based on your extensive experience in the industry and involvement with the initiatives and policies that we've just spoken about, what advice would you give to young professionals from diverse backgrounds who aspire to pursue a career in the property industry?
I genuinely feel that the most positive outcomes are when you are able to be, and you are, your authentic self. So when you are allowed to be in that safe space and you are an advocate for what you believe in, when you are true to yourself, it genuinely shines out of you and radiates out of you to the people around you, and they will feel the strength that you have in that comfort. It can take a lot of courage to do that, and it can often feel frightening to do that. And I'd also say to a young person, you don't have to have it all together at this stage. You don't necessarily need to have a full self-brand or to have your entire career planned out, or have made the decision at 21 that I'm going to be the next CEO. I don't think that that's the most important thing. But one thing I would say from my time is that people that are fake and people that are trying to be clones are found out incredibly quickly, and not desperately people that make a great team. As I said before, this industry is very much a people business, and the people working in it are normal people. They want to connect with others, and they want to be listened to and heard as much. So I would say, connect with people in the industry, talk to them, follow them on LinkedIn, see what they're up to. Just have a conversation. And if this is an industry that you have a real passion for, your genuineness will show through.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much, Kate, for explaining everything you've been involved with. It's incredible what you've managed to achieve at JLL and personally.
Great. No, well, Sophia, thank you so very much for inviting me to talk. It's been a joy to meet you.
Thank you both for taking part in Empower Equity Reverse Mentoring sessions. Please do share with all your networks when the time comes. The more we open up the conversation of female retention, the more likely we are to see change, of course. The Madison Berkeley Empower Equity Campaign Reverse Mentoring sessions are supported by industry network organisation Ladies in Real Estate.